of the book was just dumb and dumb. Is it entertaining? I think that's still debatable, and I think it's unnecessary and shows that the writing and also the characters are not very clever. So imagine swapping clothes, your credit card, and your phone with a stranger from the next 12 hours so that you can spy on your controlling husband and find enough dirt to escape your ironclad prenup. You pull this off flawlessly. The digital trail is perfect. But instead of uncovering evidence against him, you find your husband unalive in your family home, and now only one of you have a perfect airtight alibi. Today we are breaking down one of the messiest and convoluted thrillers I've read to date, packed with characters that are weighed down by subplots that add absolutely nothing to the endgame, and yet the book still manages to rate surprisingly high online. Friends, we need to talk about Elston's newest book, Anatomy of an Alibi, where nobody is innocent and the murder investigation is a complete train wreck. I believe this book was highly anticipated because Ashley Elton gave us one of the biggest thrillers, I think, even though I haven't yet read it. I think the book was called First Lie Wins, which was very, very popular. Unfortunately, I didn't start with that one. I chose to read the dud one first, but I will get into why that is. Right? My expectation though for this book was still high. I kept seeing getting recommended on Book Talk, BookTube, and it was rated well on Goodreads. But for me, this book completely missed the mark altogether, and I just was frustrated at the end of the day. On paper, the premise sounds really interesting. You have two women, Camille, a glamorous, rich trophy wife who suspects that her high-powered lawyer husband, Ben, is hiding dark, dangerous secrets. And then you have a woman named Aubrey who is a fearlessly independent bartender who believes that Ben knows the truth behind this hit-and-run accident that unalived her parents 10 years ago. You find out that Ben is a control freak and he likes to track everything Camille's done, especially digitally, even on her phone, on her car by a GPS. And so then the two women have to hatch a plan that is a big high staked, right? For exactly 12 hours, Aubrey will become Camille's identity. She'll wear her clothes, carry her phone, and leave a perfect digital trail of breadcrumbs for Ben to track and monitor. Meanwhile, the real Camille will go off-grid to spy on her husband and try to dig up some dirt and some truth. It's the ultimate digital identity swap. Until the next morning when, unfortunately, Ben turns up unalive. It sounds like it should be a 5-star rated book, right? Except the execution is where everything completely goes awry. First of all, there are simply too many characters to keep up with in the book, and also unnecessary. The narrative is flooded with perspective, so many of them. Then add in a whole lot of people in a found family, housemate living together situation. And then they throw in some more external players that I think doesn't add anything but confuses the plot. And I know that sometimes they add it in for red herrings to keep you off track of who the actual person is that did the crime. But a lot of it didn't eventuate to anything, and it just leaves me frustrated of why it was included. And I feel like it should have been edited out. If you want to shock us, don't throw subplots and people at us, just write better. And then the worst thing is none of them are particularly likable. You've got like 10,000 characters and not one of them you want to win, right? They all felt incredibly one-dimensional. And I would say probably because the author had so many characters to write about and keep track of, she probably didn't have the space to make them endearing or even multi-layered for us to sort of relate to. A lot of the writing, unfortunately, of the characters became very flat and almost young adult-like instead of a sophisticated adult thriller that you might read somewhere else. The individual character arcs doesn't even get developed or explained any further for a lot of them. Instead, you get a giant pool of beige characters that speak and sound exactly the same. Even our two female protagonists, who are the two main characters in this book, at times sound like they speak and talk and act in the same way, which is weird because they come from very walks of life. You have a very well-to-do sort of socialite influencer lady, and then you have a younger sort of more street smart sassy girl is what we're being told she is, but neither of them speak in the way that they are portrayed in the book, and their actions don't behave differently, right? I thought Camille was a bit more vapid housewife character that isn't too clever, that sort of it gets pulled in and out of the situations. And then Aubrey is the planner, is the smart one that knows how to get around in the world because she's had to survive a lot better. But it didn't happen that way either. Aubrey also made bad decisions and seemed to have to let other characters sort of step in and help her when it's important, rather than being the one that is sort of driving the plot along. I guess the only exception of characters to this book is Hank. Hank, though, is still a wonderfully average, relatable man, right? Sitting in a sea of uninteresting characters. And honestly, he was the only one that maybe you were like, okay, I would hope that things work out for you. But the base is really low. If you take Hank out of this book and put him in any other book that is a bit more well written, I think he would still be coming across as really beigey and boring and just disappear in the background, and is someone that you will never ever think about or care about ever again. But because he's sitting here amongst like people that are much less well written than he is, potentially that is the only reason why he stands out. Aside from the character issues, then you have the pacing of it, which is bogged down by massive webs of different side plots that each character is bringing along, and you start to feel completely frustrated as why they were at it in the first place. I understand sometimes you have to add side stories to throw you off, to add red herrings, to get you off track and lead you down a different track to deceive you, right? But a lot of that doesn't deceive me. It just made me go, I know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to point me in this direction and it's not going there because it's too obvious of a point and it's too obvious of a red herring. So I'm just going to ignore it. But at the same time, you've spent so much time just wasting my time and pages reading about it that in the end for the reader, you're just frustrated. You're not intrigued. You're not like amazed by the smartness of what the writer is doing. You're just like, you're just doing too much here now. Then there is probably two romances in the story, right? One of them doesn't really eventuate. It's just like a little bit of a subplot. And then the other one eventuates into a full-blown romance situation that came out of nowhere. It starts to build superficially a little bit, but there is zero chemistry between the two characters and there is no showing of why they would be so falling for each other and sort of almost falling in love with each other. It just says that it was necessary to tell you that they fell in love with each other to move the plot along and to explain the ending of why certain characters will behave that way, right? But because you are told that they fall in love and that's why they are behaving this way, rather than showing me that they fell in love and therefore it makes sense for the character to decide, it becomes really unbelievable. But nothing compares to the awful final act. The ending of the book was just dumb and incredibly rushed. I won't spoil who the killer is in this very section yet. I will later on. But the realization of who it is and the reveal is, I think, lazy. It relies on characters who were barely even mentioned or developed in the story, but yet they were the culprits. It feels less like a shocking twist and more like a rushed cop-out that the author just had to keep under a certain workout and just end it right here. And ta-da, we're done. Let's move on with our lives. If you did love First Lie Wins, you can tell me why, and maybe I'm going to give it a chance to read it. And you like the way this author writes, then I think you can still give this book a chance and ever give it a go. But for me, Anatomy of an Alibi was a major disappointment. Now, without further ado, we are going to get into the twist, the whole insane story told. No secrets, no holding back, pure spoilers. You now have been warned. And just as a gentle reminder, because we are doing, a thriller novel, there will be maybe possibly some triggers that I just needed to warn you about. There's obviously about people being unalive. There is some gore and description of, accidents that happen with children and with substance abuse that will come about. So if those topics are not for you and they will trigger you or you're not in the right state of mind, then of course, do the right thing and you don't have to listen any further, or definitely don't check out the book. But if you're all okay with those topics being talked to you, obviously I will sort of breeze over them and not give too much details. You can stick with me and we're about to get into the full story now. At the very start of this book, you are giving the definition of an alibi. An alibi, a defense offered by a defendant who claims that he or she was at some other place at the time of the commission of the crime and therefore did not commit the crime charged. by Louisiana State Bar Association. I think understanding this definition matters because almost every character in this book is scrambling to get an alibi for themselves, or maybe for someone they are connected with and they want to help out. Like I said, the book starts off really interesting, and an interesting premise. We are introduced to Aubrey on the day of the alibi. So it's Saturday, October 10. Aubrey is sitting at a bar called Chantilly's in St. Francisville. She's wearing a wig, a particular dress, and high heels, and she's deliberately nursing a cocktail that she dislikes, we get told. So we know right off the bat she's drinking something that normally she wouldn't do, and she's dressed in a way that she normally wouldn't be. So she's pretending to be someone else. To kill time until her alarms goes off at a specific time, she is sitting there and starts flirting and playing a guessing game about local patrons in the bar with a charming, handsome stranger who sits next to her and buys her a drink. When her phone alarm rings, she suddenly just stops the conversation, removes her painful shoes outside, and then she just drives away. So Aubrey meets Camille in a gas station bathroom where she sort of takes off all her disguise, her wig, her dress, her heels, and she gives back Camille her purse, her Range Rover keys, her wedding ring, and her phone. And it is revealed that Aubrey spent the day pretending to be her. The reason why she has to pretend to be Camille is because we know Ben, the high-profile defense lawyer, would track Aubrey's digital footprint instead of Camille's, and then Camille then can do her own little mission that day. But we get told early on that Camille's mission is unsuccessful. Aubrey then drives away in an old Honda Accord back to her shared boarding house in Baton Rouge, where her housemates are waiting. And they soon and fast realize that because Camille has been unsuccessful, they now have to pivot to their own plan B. Plan B is this strategy designed by Aubrey and her roommates. Her roommates are Deacon, Shane, and Eddie, and they want to be able to get information that Ben has that Aubrey needs because I don't really trust that Camille would even share it with them. And since she was unsuccessful in the plan, it looks like they have to activate that anyway, right? But I will explain more on that plan later on. It is now the next day. It's Sunday, October 11th, and we are introduced to our new character and his point of view. His name is Hank. Hank Landry is Ben's law partner. He receives a frantic call from Camille and he rushes over to their house in Bayliss. He finds that Camille is sobbing on the steps next to a mysterious 1970s Mustang, and he's like, oh, that's interesting that you have this. I've never seen this before. But again, more on that later because it's related to Plan B, which is why I'm just mentioning it. But really, it really doesn't matter too much whether you know about this Mustang or not. Hank enters the house before the police get there and discover that Ben is unalive on his office floor. He's covered in blood. Hank establishes himself quickly as Camille's attorney on the arrival of the officers and Detective Sullivan, who is going to be the main detective on this case. And the home is now officially locked down to be as a crime scene. In a flashback to the previous day, you get Camille explaining how she had brought a beat-up Honda Accord, which later obviously you know that Aubrey takes, with cash so that she can slip back into Baton Rouge without Ben tracking her, because Ben tracks her movement through her phone, through the GPS in her vehicle, and so she needed something that is not being watched by him. Because she has this strict bad behavior clause in her prenup. Camille wants to divorce Ben, but she can't without being poor, basically, right? Camille needs hard proof that her husband Ben has done something really bad in order to be able to walk away from her marriage while still being financially stable. So things that will stand up in her prenup as being something bad is something unlawful or maybe a cheating scandal, right? And this is where I'm like, oh God, the privileged white lady starts to jump off the page.
This rich white lady.
You get told that Camille has been an influencer in her life. She goes on places, she takes photos, she eats at lovely places, yada yada. And she has no clear job. She clearly has no savings on her own. And she has a lifestyle that was originally funded by her rich daddy and then now by her successful husband. She wants out of this marriage, but still she wants to be financially backed by her family and her parents, or maybe her husband in an agreement. Her parents won't be supporting her divorce, though, unless there was a real valid reason for them to do so. Being told that Ben is just controlling and not letting Camille sort of be independent for her parents is not enough as a reason for her to divorce. It is for the outside world, because it is red flags to be like, this guy is treating this woman like an object and very controlling and possibly abusive. But in this life, the parents are like, nah, not good enough. You stick it out, because that's what we do here. That's what we waspy people do. We stick out these sort of marriages. Unless he cheats, unless he does something illegal, you stay married. And if you leave him without these reasons, we won't be backing you financially, and you're gonna have to fend for yourself. And I'm just like, well, Camille, babe, you've been an influencer your whole life, maybe, or from a very young age. Where is the money that you've been making from being an influencer, or you just getting free meals, right? Why have you not plotted and got yourself an escape fund rather than plotting this way and trying to find dirt on your husband? I think it would have been easier for you to actually make your own money and leave him, because it's not like he was trying to stop her from doing that. So right from the beginning, I was side-eyeing her, and already I'm not liking Camille in any way. Then Camille openly admits that even though Aubrey thinks that they're working together, she has no intentions of sharing whatever evidence she finds. So yes, she was fully planning on double-crossing the poor girl. Like I said, unlikable. And Aubrey already sort of sensed it, and hence why her housemates and her have already done a backup plan in case this fell through. Now, if these ladies don't even trust each other and don't even seem to like each other, then why are they working together on this alibi? You get this flashback early on, in early September. You have Frank dropping off his heavily intoxicated friend Ben after a charity banquet. And then you have Ben rambling to his wife, "Oh no, I have forked up." And Camille's like wondering, what is this referring to? And is this bad enough that I can get out of my marriage, right? So she starts to snoop around and tries to find out. After Ben passes out because he's intoxicated, Camille finds that his usual ironclad briefcase is unlocked, so she goes and snoops. And what she finds is a bar napkin from this bar called Doug's Tavern containing Aubrey's Price's name and her phone number and her home address. She also discovers from his car history that Ben has physically been to Aubrey's house many times. So she's thinking, well, you cheater, pumpkin eater.
Cheater, compulsive eater.
And also, this is enough dirt on you for me to leave you, right? Except that the answer is so obvious, and this is a thriller, and I'm like, no, that's not the reason. I already know it's not the reason. But, you know, Camille has discovered that on her own. Camille goes down and tracks down Aubrey at the Doug's Tavern where she works as a bartender, accusing her straight away of having an affair with Ben. And Aubrey is shocked and denies even meeting Ben. She doesn't know who the hell Ben is, so how could she have an affair with him? Aubrey is like trying to think, why would this guy be following me for maybe another reason? Then she suddenly asks Camille, does this involve a guy named Paul Granger? Now, Paul Granger is a convicted man, right? He has been put in jail for being the driver of a truck that unalived her parents 10 years ago. This man, though, is now attempting to appeal his case as he continues to claim that he's been innocent this whole time. She knows this because Paul has been sending her letters, handwritten letters and little trinkets of things that he's made in jail to Aubrey to, I guess, get on her good side and also to get her to go visit him so he can explain the full story to her because he wants to make, you know, amends and he wants to declare his innocence to her. Now, at this point, before Aubrey can even get into this conversation with Camille about Paul, her intimidating housemate Deacon arrives because Deacon sounds like he has a little bit of a crush on Aubrey, always picks her up after work for her safety, and promptly this gives Camille the opportunity to flee and run away. All right. Of course, after this confrontation, Aubrey is not just going to let lie and just let things be. She and her housemates start digging around to see who Camille is and what the hell is going on. Now, her housemates are very stealthy and well connected in the world of some dodgy behaviors, and Deacon intercepts one of Ben's private investigators. So Ben uses private investigators for his law firm on his cases, and he also uses it privately. And he learns that Ben is desperately seeking a surveillance video from the night of the accident. Aubrey believes now that the footage could incriminate Ben or maybe someone he knows in his family. And if Ben gets to it first, he's certainly going to destroy it and not let it sort of show up anywhere else. More than anything though, she just wants to get a hold of the video and find out who, unalived her parents and what really happened on that night that they passed away. Aubrey also knows that Ben plans to meet someone at his house to get evidence or something important on the day that Camille is meant to be away in St. Francisville. So now she approaches Camille with the identity swap plan. And yes, this plan is very convoluted because my thing is, Aubrey, if you and your roommates can already uncover so much information about Ben, surely there is another way to get the evidence yourself, right? To be able to get this video surveillance or to maybe hijack something in his house and tape him while he's watching the video so that you can see what is on the video, right? But no, instead they go with this plan altogether. Now, how does Aubrey get Camille to agree to this plan? Aubrey and her housemates, Deacon, confront Camille outside a junior league meeting one day, and Aubrey uses the following tactic to convince Camille to join forces, right? Firstly, Aubrey falsely claims that she already has evidence of Ben's guilt in the decade-old accident and that the truth is inevitably going to come out anyway, right? So you might as well help us along. Then Aubrey explains that Ben is planning a meeting to suppress this evidence while Camille is supposedly to be out of town. Camille then thinks, well, this proof is definitely bad behavior of Ben, and it will trigger that clause in a prenup, which would allow her to now leave the marriage with financial stability and everything will be well for her. So of course, because she's going to benefit from this plan, she says yes to the swap for the day. Right, so at the start of the book and also the way that the blurb of this book is written, you think that the whole point of this alibi is so that maybe Camille can commit this crime and maybe even unalive her husband so that she can get out of this marriage that she doesn't want to be in. But at the end of the day, someone beats her to it, and then the mystery of the book is like, oh, well, who has more of a reasoning to want to unalive Ben, right? But no, this whole alibi between Camille and Aubrey is just so they can create this dramatic information gathering mission. So all this chaos, changing all the GPS tracking, outfit swaps, just to snoop around. I think it is not the most efficient way to do it. Is it entertaining? I think that's still debatable, and I think it's unnecessary and shows that the writing and also the characters are not very clever. Now we come back to the present time, which is October 11, the day where we discover Ben's body, and Hank spends the night at the law firm that he works at with Ben, preparing to break the news of his death to the staff the next day. At the office, Hank pulls up Ben's digital estate files and legal documents on his computer. He reviews a formal notice that Ben had given him the previous week. Ben was planning to dissolve their partnership and legally force Hank out of the firm without any clients of his own. However, Ben passed away before he could finalize the paperwork officially, and so now the firm defaults entirely to Hank. Along with this genuine grief that he's feeling for the loss of his business partner, Hank does experience a profound wave of relief because now he's not going to be out of a job, being pushed out of his firm, right? So at this point, you notice a pattern with this writer, which is they offer up red herrings like that they are just too obvious. And of course, after giving us this information, you're like, oh, you're trying to make it look like that he has a motive to unalive Ben. But we're only like a few chapters in and you're showing this hand so early so that it cannot be Hank and you're making it way too obvious for us to suspect him, right? You're trying to keep us off track and be like, whoa, it's Hank. But it's a thriller novel, so it cannot be the person you expect from the very get-go, right? It's not Camille because you made it too obvious, and then it's not Hank, right? But maybe I thought there's some twist that you'll get around it where you'll still surprise me at the end of the day, and it's actually Hank and Camille together because there is some sort of like bond between the two where Hank seems to be quite caring of Camille and is quite interested in her in some way. You'll notice in this book, it travels along timelines a lot, adding a lot of layer of complexity into it where you'll go to the day of the alibi, you'll go the day after the alibi, you'll go way back 10 years ago, and you may go forward a few weeks, right? You'll notice that each of the chapters are at least dated and with the person's point of view, so not to confuse you, which I guess it's needed when the tone is the same, and because there is so many things going on, you need to at least keep track of what period we are in talking about. We're back on Saturday morning, on the day when the alibi plot starts. After leaving the gas station in Camille's Range Rover, it is Aubrey's point of view. She immediately goes off script of the plan that her and Camille have agreed upon. She meets her housemate Eddie at a fee shop as opposed to at a festival that she was meant to be at that Camille was telling Ben that's where she'll be. Because Aubrey correctly guessed that Camille cannot be trusted to share what she finds on Ben, Aubrey's housemate are going to help her to execute now plan B on this day. And I know I have been dangling this carrot for a while, so we're going to now explain what plan B is. To execute this plan and get the surveillance video themselves, Shane and Eddie, who were retired car thieves, we find out, so they are skilled in, doing things with cars, uses a specialized digital device to clone Camille's Range Rover keyless code, programs an app to access to that vehicle, and installs a tracker on the car so they can secretly map and access Camille's house, track Camille's and Ben's movement moving forward, which is important. Now, why do they need to also track Ben's car? Because they need to track their movement on when Ben goes to get this video. Because this video is going to come from this man named Kevin Foster. Kevin Foster was the chief of police in Louisiana in this small town called corkboard for 30 years and a long time associate of the Everett family. Foster turns out to be Randall Everett's go-to guy. Now, who's Randall Everett? Randall Everett is Camille's father, a well-to-do businessman, and he seems to be in corruption with the cop. He uses Foster's position to get him to do dirty work for the family in order to keep protecting the family's interests so that they keep continuing being rich and free and doing whatever the hell they want in this small town and being like the boss of the land. Now, you find out Foster, what does he get out of this arrangement? Well, he gets money, right? He's been getting large campaign donations from both Randall and Ben while he was, I think, trying to be the chief of police. He needed the money to obviously keep running to be the chief of police. And Randall and Ben were like subsidizing his campaign this whole time that he was in office. You find out the reason why that they want to track Ben's vehicle is because at some point Ben was going to meet up with Foster or break into Foster's house to get this video image, and Deacon was going to just miraculously show up at the same time that Ben was there and try to get the video off him once Ben gets this video out of this safe that Foster has in his house. Right, that was the plan. The whole plan, convoluted plan, was just so that he could go break into the house at the same time as Ben and get the video so they have it. Now, remember how I mentioned the red Mustang that was parked at Camille and Ben's house? Well, that was Eddie's and Shane's project. Ben had hired Shane and Eddie to refurbish it, not because he cared about cars, but because he gave him an excuse to go visit them, which means he gets to visit Aubrey at the same time. His PI, Vic, had discovered that Aubrey lived with his two skilled mechanics. So Ben used the Mustang as a cover-up to get close and find out what she knew about the hit and run accident. Specifically, he was worried at one point that maybe she was the one that had the surveillance video that would be able to expose him or his family, right? So that's why he was sussing it out. Again, wildly convoluted. Why not just use your PI to go work out what Aubrey knows, right? Maybe break into her house or follow her along to see who she was visiting rather than buying a whole car as an excuse to go and visit the house. It felt really excessive, and he really never spoke to her directly and met her, so he's never about being able to quiz her on it anyway. So this plot didn't seem to go anywhere, and it wasn't useful because, again, overthinking it, guys. The other plan of part B was for Aubrey to go off script and to go visit Paul. Right, on the day of the alibi, she not only meets up with Deacon, she also meets up with another housemate named Serenity, the only other female that lives in the house, right? And she hands over Camille's phone to Serenity, who will walk around the park and the festival and create a digital trail of the movement, while Aubrey and Deacon head to Louisiana State Penitentiary to go interview Paul. Upon meeting Paul, he tells Aubrey that there's this surveillance footage from a gas station that proves that he was not the one driving the truck on the night that her parents were unalived. Aubrey realizes at that point that I think this tip-off came from a now dead policeman named Kevin Foster, which explains why everyone is suddenly obsessed with getting this footage from Kevin Foster. Ben wants the video, Aubrey wants the video, and her extremely loyal housemates are all into on the act, even though the book never even gives us any backstories of why these housemates are so committed to her to help her get to this, or why they are all so dedicated to each other. You just know that they love each other and they've bonded, and we just have to accept it and move on with our lives. On the same day of the alibi, we go back to Camille's point of view, who has managed to at least slip back into her house undetected. So we think, utilizing the fact that Ben is going to be disabling his internal cameras to facilitate his own little secret meeting. He's going to be meeting someone there and he doesn't want to be caught on camera. Now, working quickly, she plants 6 hidden Bluetooth cameras throughout the house, the office, the kitchen, the bedroom, etc., and retreats to a makeshift steakhouse spot in her attic where she's, got water, she's got her iPad to also watch this feed from her Bluetooth videos and camera. While waiting there, Camille monitors Aubrey's location via her GPS and is alarmed to find out that Aubrey has gone a little bit off script, right? Rather than visiting the festival that they had planned, she is at a feed store, and she'll be like, well, why are you at a feed store? And even Ben notices that his wife is at a feed store, because Ben then texts Camille, mocking her of her choice of shopping locations, and she just has to play along and be like, yes, I'm at the feed store for whatever reason. And she answers him via her iPad, which you later find out is tracked by Ben. If he tracks your phone, if he tracks your car, what makes you think he's not going to be tracking every single device that you have? Why would you not get a different, if you bought another car, surely you can afford to buy an iPad or a burner phone or something to sort of answer these messages and use to watch and tape the videos that you are tracking Ben on. But, we know that Camille is not meant to be a clever character, or if she is, the author has failed there to make her clever, because she makes really bad decisions all throughout the book. Ben finally arrives home. He strips off his formal lawyer persona and begins working in his home office. Soon after, a restored 1970 red Mustang arrives down the driveway, and it's Eddie. Ben acts like he's thrilled to see him, and the two leave for a test drive. While they're on their test drive, then another lanky white man shows up named Shane, we find out, who is the partner in crime. He arrives in a work truck. He uses a remote control to open the garage, and then he just goes inside for a little bit of time. And then he steps out of the garage at the same time that Eddie and Ben have arrived back, and they all seem chummy and know each other. So in that time, while Ben and Eddie were on their test drive, Shane was in the garage adding a tracker to Ben's vehicle. The two men and Ben then go into the office, where you know that Ben is giving them a check to thank them and to finish sort of this restorative of the car, and that ends their business with there. And Camille sees all this because she's watching on her camera. But as she's watching on her camera, she noticed that Shane looks directly into the hidden camera and smiles, because he knows that she's watching, because they're the ones that gave her the Bluetooth cameras in the first place. After they leave, Ben slams the door in a rage because it's like, oh God, they've disrupted my plan today. They were not meant to show up. And he returns back to his desk, plugs in a media player, and suddenly the face of Aubrey appears on his computer screen. And then there's a knock on the door. So I suspect this is the visitor that Ben was expecting all along. Camille is then watching, and there is a tense meeting in the kitchen between Ben and, surprise, her sister-in-law, Margaret. Ben reveals that he's tired of being under Randall Everett's thumb and explicitly says to Margaret that I provided an alibi for Silas for the night that Silas killed those people. So Silas is Camille's brother, and Silas is married to Margaret, who is now visiting Ben and talking about this revelation. Ben then discovers, though, Camille is in the house after his PI sends him a photo of Aubrey in St. Francis. Realizing that this picture is not his wife and that he's been tricked, Ben confronts Camille, manipulates her with threats of her family's secrets. Camille bolts from the house and calls Silas, who tells her, "Come meet me now. I'm in St. Francisville," coincidentally, and he's already been there watching Aubrey this whole time. So remember the handsome guy that Aubrey was flirting with in the bar at the start of the book? Well, that was Silas Everett all along. I will get into this whole reveal of Silas killed those people soon, which means that Silas is the one that unalived Aubrey's parents 10 years ago. But because that book is likes to wave all these little subtle red herrings and clues directly in our faces, I wasn't exactly clutching my pearls and being like, oh, this is such a revelation. I knew something else was amiss, right? Something doesn't seem quite right here. But first, let me explain why Silas was following Aubrey, because you're like, well, why is he doing that? That's creepy. But apparently he was doing it for her safety, right? He was being quite thoughtful. Silas knew that Ben has been lurking around Aubrey's house this whole time, desperate to find out evidence that could implicate the Everett's family. So when Ben's private investigator sent him a photo of Aubrey in St. Francisville, thinking that she was Camille, Silas panicked that whoever took it might also be nearby and might be about to hurt her. How Silas find out that he got sent the photograph is a bit of a mystery to me. I couldn't work that out, or maybe I missed it. But regardless, everybody's following everybody and they seem to be knowing all the secrets anyway, except for the main ones that are important. He tells Camille that knowing that Aubrey was orphaned because of him has haunted him for the last 10 years. And now he wants to save her and protect her. How lovely, right? What a chivalrous, noble behavior, or just suspicious and creepy. You decide. It's a very Everett's family, sort of family on brand behavior that they do this. He also admits he had someone watching Aubrey this whole time. At this point in time, we don't know who it is, but it's apparently meant to protect her, but mostly sounds like a restraining order waiting to happen. Camille meets Silas in St. Francis, and during that time, she describes their chat as the most honest and raw conversation they've ever had in their whole entire life. So it just sounds like they're not very close in the past, but now they're revitalizing their brother-sisterly relationship. And Silas drops a massive bomb. Thinks that he is the one that was driving that night in the truck that unalived her parents. Doesn't know for sure, but it was because he was under substance and he could not completely remember, and he has blackout moments of what happened. But it all started in Paul's house, because Paul in that small neighborhood is the cool uncle who lets minors party at his house, and he passes around illegal substances and sells it to him under his own roof. Naturally, seeing things go sideways that night because everybody is intoxicated and nobody knows what the hell is going on. But even though things go bad for Silas, it seems, it doesn't matter, because enter Daddy of the Year, Randall Everett. Silas explains that Randall fixed the whole deadly accident in a record time. Within mere hours, dear old Dad managed to lock down Ben as a fake alibi for Silas, and Margaret was there partying with Silas too and sort of knew of the accident, and Randall just threatens her and bribes her into keeping quiet permanently. Silas admits he has lived with this crushing guilt and being the murderer for this whole decade. And then we move back into present time now, right? Because Pank wakes up in his office. He's slept on the couch because apparently he's been investigating the murder himself to help Camille clear her name, and his health doesn't come into play. He's going to be sleep deprived and he doesn't care because he somewhat has a crush on her and he needs to really find out what happens, right? Realizing that the firm could now become a crime scene adjacent circus, he tells his assistant Lila to hire on-site security. He asks her to also pull Ben's calendar, sort through his active cases, and make sure nobody stays in the building after hours, even though he puts himself at risk. Who cares? Then Layla casually reveals that she and Ben's assistant, Trisha, already knew Ben was planning to dissolve the partnership and shove Hank out of the firm. But because Ben passed away before the paperwork's finalized, now she knows the whole firm belongs to him. And I thought this little reveal was like, oh, okay, maybe this is a little bit of a hint that Lila was the one to be important in this case, and she was the one that possibly unalived Ben, because maybe along the way because he's corrupt, he might have done something that offended her or caused her pain, that she would want revenge. And also she likes Hank, so she's gonna be like, two birds, one stone, I'm gonna save Hank and also get rid of this mess, right? I was ready for it. I had this conspiracy hat on to fully sort of be shocked by it and be like, oh, that's a really clever revelation. The secretary did it, right? But no, just another character tossed into the blender for flavor, and they're forgotten about because we never hear from Lila and Trisha ever again, and they're not important really in the final story. So Hank is at his firm. He's telling his workers about what happened to Ben, and they're mourning his loss. But this mourning is quickly interrupted because Camille's father, Randall, just unceremonially walks into Hank's office and demands a meeting without an appointment. Hank reflects on the dark, whispered history of this family as, you know, he's having this inner dialogue, and he knows that this family is powerful. They are multi-generational rich, and they are from this small town that has built their wealth on sugarcane and natural gases, but in a bootlegging sort of way, in a legal and a corruption sort of way. Enemies are around, sniffing to take them down. He knows that they conveniently always just seems to disappear. What does Randall want for this meeting? He wants to threaten Hank to make sure he doesn't run this law firm to the ground, because according to the partnership agreement, Camille, his daughter, is entitled to a percentage of the income from the firm for the next 10 years. And he knows that Ben was going to remove Hank from the firm. Randall conveniently asks Hank, so where were you Saturday night on October 10th? Unfortunately though, Hank doesn't have a strong alibi, which is unfortunate for him because everybody else seems to in this book. So who else finds out that Hank doesn't have a strong alibi? Obviously, Sullivan, the detective, who needs to investigate this case and interview everybody that's important to it, right? And he does interview Hank on 2 separate occasions. So during these conversations interrogations between Hank and Sullivan, a lot of pieces of information are revealed that is important to this story. We find out that Sullivan knows that Ben received this FedEx package and it was left open on Ben's desk, and it contains a document for a replacement key for a specific Defense Force safe. The safe, which we know that is in Foster's house. So Ben had made a key to be able to open this house when he obviously goes in and breaks in to find the surveillance video. Sullivan knows also that this safe does not exist in Ben's house, and he knows that it must belong somewhere else, right? But he doesn't really know where at this moment in time. But Hank, unfortunately, has no knowledge about this at all. So he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So he can't answer it or help him out with that. Then, of course, Hank gets asked about his alibi. What were you doing that night? And he says, well, I was home alone working on his car, on a 1970s, Pontiac GTO, like some sort of vintage car or something. And he admits that no one could corroborate this alibi, which is bad luck for him. But this bad luck doesn't matter because nothing comes out of it. He doesn't get thrown into jail. He doesn't get arrested because he's not the target person that they're going to frame this situation on. You'll find out who. Sullivan also shows Hank a photo sent to Ben's phone by a private investigator mid-afternoon on a particular day where the murder was occurring. While Sullivan initially believes it is a photo of Camille in St. Francisville, Hank immediately recognizes the woman in the photo as Aubrey Price, because Hank finds a file on Ben's desk that day that he was looking through what cases were active, and he finds a folder that has Aubrey Price written on it, right? But this file is quite unique because it lacked the standard client information that they normally would collect from a client of theirs, signaling to Hank that this was a private investigation file that doesn't really relate to the firm's cases, but more a private matter. He also finds out that Ben was the one that forbidden the firm from taking on Paul Granger's pro bono case months earlier. And now we know why. So Hank had been approached by Paul to do a pro bono case to appeal a murder case that he was convicted of 10 years ago. And Hank was keen to take on this case, but then it was vetoed by Ben and he was like, nah, that case can't be taken and no one in his firm is to take on this case. And now we know why. And at that time when there was active cases, Hank had to take a meeting with Pete Sanders, a former client of Ben's. And he accidentally uncovers that Ben is super corrupt. Pete expects Hank to continue his case in the same way that Ben usually routinely takes care of it, with intimidating witnesses and bending the system in favor of their client. Then Hank finds a private note in these cases referencing a person named Chief all the time. Chief does this for them, Chief does that for them, which points straight to Foster and confirms that in the past, Foster not only has been helping Randall, he has been also helping Ben manipulate cases for all these years. But it turns out Kevin Foster had enough of being a corrupt police chief and was righting his wrongs driven by a terminal medical diagnosis, and he had a religious awakening, right? So Foster was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and in December of the year preceding the story's events, by May, the cancer had spread and he was basically going to be terminal, and he had made the decision to stop treatment and retire from his job as a chief of police. He expressed a public desire to leave the world with a clean slate and a pure heart, which means the thing that Foster did that was the most corrupt was notably his handling of the case 10 years ago, the hit and run accident that unalived Aubrey Price's parents. He admitted to Paul Granger during a prison visit that he knew Paul was innocent, but had allowed him to take the fall as a favor to the Everett's family, right? As an act of restitution, Foster obtained a surveillance video from the night of the accident that is going to prove that Paul Granger was not the driver of the truck. Because Foster knew that he was going to pass away soon, he went on a tour trying to make amends to various people that he had wronged over the years. This unfortunately might have also meant that there are other cases that Ben used him on was going to come out in the light, and it was going to incriminate Ben, and therefore, Ben was desperate then to find the surveillance video as well for that situation. Apart from the 10-year accident, he also wanted to get the video in case there was other files on there that might have incriminated him further throughout the years. So at this time, Detective Sullivan also interviews Camille because she's the wife, and generally, you know, the partners are sometimes guilty of it, or at least they know something. And it reveals in the interrogation that there was a knife sitting on the desk of Ben, right? A hunting knife that Camille had gifted to him a while ago because she was the one that made it. And it had disappeared from the crime scene. And he's like, well, where's it gone? Because it seems like that was the weapon that unalived Ben. And Camille's like, well, I don't know where it's gone. Nobody knows where it's gone until suddenly it appears in Aubrey's house, in her drawers, right? She's going to her house, she's looking through drawers looking for something else, and suddenly she finds it. Luckily, she finds it early on, and she tells her housemates, who goes and gets rid of it for her because they're trustworthy and all that stuff. Luckily, she discovered this quite early because suddenly the police arrive at her house with a warrant to search, obviously a tip-off to search for the weapon. So you're like, oh, somebody has obviously planted this in her house, and then they call the cops and now they're searching for it. But luckily they didn't find anything because that was all gone. Now at the same time, because Hank now knows about Aubrey and is investigating the case to help clear Camille, to make sure that Camille is not found guilty for doing this, and also to help himself because he doesn't have a great alibi, he decides, I'm going to go now and visit Aubrey and interview her and see what the hell is going on. So upon going to her house, after the raid of her house from the police, he then says, that's really interesting, and says, what else do you have here? She shows him like all these handwritten letters that she's been receiving from Paul and all the little gifts that she's been getting. And he noticed that one of the letters is typed up, and he's like, oh, I wonder why he typed all this once and he handwritten all of the others. Aubrey obviously doesn't know, and Hank is like, you know what? I'm just going to go visit Paul and work it out and ask him myself. So he does. Hank goes and visits Paul in prison, and he asks about the last letter that Aubrey received that was typed, and it was wishing her more luck than they had, right? Sent with one of his handmade jewelry boxes. So like I said, Paul has been sending her letters and little trinkets. He makes like these leather trinkets, and he also makes these leather jewelry boxes. But Paul goes, I didn't send a letter that was typed because I only handwrite my letters. I don't have access to a computer, so why would I be able to type anything up? And also, I never sent her a jewelry box because to send a letter is cheap, but to send a package is really expensive, and I just don't have that sort of money. But he does surprisingly say, well, I did give one of these boxes to Kevin Foster when he came to visit me to tell him about the surveillance camera. So Hank pieces everything together, and he realizes that this box and this letter was sent by Foster and not by Paul. And he's like, I wonder why he would send her a jewelry box. Like, what's so special about your jewelry boxes that he would need to send her one? And then Paul goes, maybe it's because I've got a secret compartment in this jewelry box that I put in there. And he shows that their jewelry box at the bottom flips open and there's a special hidden compartment there. And this is when Hank realizes, oh my goodness, I think Foster has used the box to hide and send Aubrey the surveillance video, meaning that the footage was never in his safe all along. So yes, everybody has been wasting their time coming up with plan Bs, getting keys to go and get the surveillance camera from his safe in the Foster house, and it eventuated to nothing because at some point even Camille and Silas goes in her car to Foster's house to go find the video once they've had this like one-on-one, deep and meaningful chat. And Deacon goes there as well because that's part of plan B to intervene. And they all notice that there is nothing. There is no video in the safe because it's been in the jewelry box all along. So Hank calls Aubrey over the phone and he says, go to the jewelry box and open it up, and ta-da, there's a USB stick in there which probably has the video of the surveillance. Now enter another character. His name is Frank. We don't hear much of him except we know that Frank is dating Serenity. He's the boyfriend to Serenity and he's always around the house. He doesn't really get involved in the plan. He doesn't really say anything. He's just like this extra person. But even though he's not in the house, he's considering trusted because they talk about all this situation in front of him, even though he's like a fairly new boyfriend to Serenity, right? And so he's there. Aubrey finds the USB stick. He sees it and she's like, I don't have a computer to watch this like USB video, like to watch the video that's on this USB stick. And luckily Frank being helpful, he's like, don't worry, I've got a computer. Kia, give me the USB stick. I'll go get my computer and we can all watch it together. La-di-da-da-da. But Frank is a plant working for Silas this whole time. So remember how Silas has told Camille that he's been watching Aubrey and planted someone this whole time? Well, that was Frank, who then subsequently is dating Serena, or maybe that's the ploy, or maybe he did like Serena. I don't know. No one says. It doesn't go into it anymore about whether or not they reunite or anything like that. But Frank steals the USB stick and he gives it to Silas. Convoluted, but that's how it goes. So Camille and Silas watch the video, which is on the drive. And yes, surprisingly or not surprisingly, it's not Paul driving, but surprisingly, it's also not Silas driving. But at this point, I wasn't even surprised because I was like, it was too obvious that you were trying to make it look like it was him because it was Margaret that was driving the vehicle, right? That night, Margaret was intoxicated. Silas was intoxicated, but Silas was passed out. So Margaret took the car for a joyride with Silas next to her. At some point, he comes in and out of like consciousness and they go for a joyride and she's the one that hits the car. But because Silas is in and out of consciousness, she pulls them out of the car. And when he comes to, she's like, oh my gosh, you were driving and you've caused an accident and now we have to run away. Foster knows that on the video, it wasn't Silas that did it. It was Margaret. But because Foster wanted to extort Randall all these years for money, he just continued letting Silas think that he was the one that was driving so that he can still keep blackmailing Randall this whole time. So ultimately, it's all capitalism and it's all about money, right? So surprise, surprise, while they're watching the video, Margaret is there creeping up on them because she's been following them the whole time. And when Camille goes like outside to maybe get a drink of water, some fresh air, Margaret pretty much attacks Camille and leaving Camille unconscious with a head injury. Hank then arrives and finds Camille, and they take her to the hospital with Silas there as well. And Margaret just runs away somewhere and just books it. We don't know where, but she just runs off into the distance, right? So while this is all going on, the Detective Sullivan decides to visit Aubrey to go interview her, or so we think. The scene before this final climax of the book is a flashback where a deal with the devil is made 10 years ago. The flashback shows a bloody Silas and Margaret arriving at Ben's window after the accident because Ben's dating Camille. Camille, unfortunately, is not in town. She's gone away on summer camp or something like that. And Silas and Margaret basically ask Ben for help. And Ben's like, I don't know what to do here. So Ben calls Randall, who offers to pay Ben's mother's medical bills because she's not well, and helps to secure Ben's career in exchange for being Silas's alibi. Ben and Margaret realize that by sharing this secret, they have permanently secured their places within the Everett family power structure, which is not bad for two kids from trashy backgrounds, right? So Ben gets to get a better career. The parents won't stand in the way of him marrying Camille, and Margaret pretty much just latches onto Silas because they share this little secret bond. She's going to keep this secret that Silas was the one driving the truck, and they get married, and she is now living a luxurious life as well. Ben and his mother provides a false statement to Chief Foster and providing the alibi for Silas about like he was with Silas this whole time. It couldn't have been him that was driving the vehicle. And on the day that Chief Foster arrives at Ben's house to interview him, he is there with a young cadet, his nephew, who is training to obviously be an officer. And his name is Nathan Sullivan. That's right, the same Sullivan who is a detective of this current murder case. He's there at the house to reveal to Aubrey that he unalived Ben because Ben just simply wouldn't stop looking for Foster's files, right? These surveillance cameras, these files not only show the sins of Foster, but also his own corruption. As Foster got older and retired, Sullivan took over as his inside man who made things go away for the Everett family. And Sullivan didn't want his bad deeds exposed. So he's there, and he starts to choke Aubrey after he reveals this secret to her. But Deacon arrives home, intervenes, and unalives Sullivan during this struggle that they've had. So they're like, oh my God, what do we do now? We've got this policeman in a house that's now passed away from the hands of Deacon. So Aubrey calls Hank. Silas and Hank arrive at Aubrey's house and they coordinate a plan to protect everyone. They decide to pin the 10-year accident on the now deceased Sullivan, claiming Foster's files prove he was the driver and that he unalived Ben to cover it all up. Aubrey agrees to this lie because she's in love with Deacon now, so this is like the romance that is convenient, and she wants Deacon to get out of this without having to go to jail, and obviously Hank will, be his lawyer. Silas might be a character winner, who knows? And they get him off. And also this helps set Paul Granger free because Sullivan is the one that drove the truck 10 years ago. Like I said, the reveal is all convoluted, right? But here at this point in time, Margaret's run away. Nothing happens to her, even though she was the true driver. And nothing actually happens to Randall. He just gets to live his life as it is. And then suddenly you get the final scene. Silas is visiting Aubrey at her bar and he's just like, yep, I'll have a drink. Oh, and just to let you know that unfortunately Margaret has passed away from a fatal accident, maybe providing the final justice possible for her parents. And Paul Granger is set free and they're like, well, why are you here? And it turns out, well, Silas is using her as an alibi because at that very point where he's at the bar, that is when Margaret's death will occur. So everything here is about creating an alibi, hence the story, right? Hence the title of the story. I tried to look back and find if there was any breadcrumbs pointing to Sullivan as the real person that unalived Ben. And honestly, there were more like breadcrumbs somebody dropped, stepped on, and swept under the rug because I barely found any. The only real clue that Ben was unalived by the hunting knife and by Sullivan was from his interrogation with Camille, that he was the one that pointed out that the weapon was gone and nobody else would have noticed that the weapon was gone. But I was like, well, Camille might have told them that that weapon was gone, or maybe there was photographs or records of this weapon being evident at some point in time, and that's how they found out that the weapon is no longer on his desk. So that was very loosey-goosey, right, as a clue to pointing towards Sullivan. And Sullivan obviously was the one that snuck into Aubrey's house and planted the weapon in her drawer. And conveniently, he was the one that tipped off the police to get the search warrant and find nothing, really. But we never got a clear explanation of when Sullivan managed to sneak into the house and pull this all off, because that's our homework to work out in our own heads and try to piece it all together. And after pages and pages of this subplot that added very little, this was the part that I think you needed to flesh out and explain more to us, right? Ignore all the Mustang, the car, Frank, everything else. Who cares? Tell us how this came about. So instead, we got nothing but frustration. And you might be hearing it through the screen now and while I'm ranting about this book in the first place. And that, my friend, is the full recap of this book. My brain hurt while I was reading it. It hurt again trying to keep track of everyone, and then it's hurting the third time. I was trying to like summarize this book into a succinct way to help you sort of explain what actually happened in the story. I hope I succeeded in some way, but honestly, I think I doubt it. I might have confused you. If it made a bit more sense to you, please let me know in the comments. But otherwise, thank you so much for sitting with me on this rant review and this rant recap of the story. As always, if you have enjoyed this rant review or you want to see more of it, definitely remember to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you know when the next video will go live, and also it will really help my small channel to grow over time. But until next time, please go have a lie down now, because I will need to. Go drink some water and recover from this chaotic little crime maze, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.